You vote for Joe Biden, count your days. Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today we'll be discussing and analyzing and reviewing a book I actually found through Twitter called This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mawtar and Max Gladstone. We'll be posting a lightly edited version on our Patreon, which is at Literary Liberation. For more content outside of the podcast, please check out our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and our Twitter at LitLibPodcast. I'm your co-host, Kristen. You can find me at KRXXTXN on all social media platforms.
And I'm your co-host, Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms. Okay, give us the rundown of what happened with Twitter. What were you doing? You were scrolling?
I was scrolling through Twitter. This is a while ago. This is kind of not before. It was post Elon Musk owning Twitter, but pre-Twitter being as shitty as it is now. Probably over the summer. When did this tweet come out? Because I think I saw it whenever it was like going viral. I can put a picture of the tweet in too. May 7th. So maybe that was before Elon Musk bought it. I don't know. But somewhere around there, I saw this tweet that says, read this. Picture of the book. Do not look up anything about it. Just read it. It's only like 200 pages. You can download it on Audible, and it's only like 4 hours. Do it right now. I'm very extremely serious. And I think actually my boyfriend saw that tweet, Tyler, and he was like, this book sounds really good. I don't know anything about it, but we should get it, and we should read it. So I was like, okay, let's get it. So we ordered it, I guess, forever ago. We ordered it and got it in, and it's been sitting on my bookshelf. I mean, not as long as some other books that have been sitting, honestly. So good on me for getting to it this year. I bought this book this year and I'm reading it this year. That's good on me. You know how many books I buy and do not read them that year that I purchase them? Probably 90% of the books that I buy. So I read it, and yeah, and I made Mariah read it to talk about it with me because we never do my suggestions for books.
It's true. I usually just pick bad books.
Yeah, but I guess you don't think I picked a very good book either.
I mean, I guess that's up for debate. We'll see as we progress through it. I had heard nothing about this book at all.
You're not on Twitter really though. Like you're on Twitter, but you don't use Twitter.
Correct.
Yeah, which I am. I probably am on Twitter every day. I think I use it maybe not as much as I use TikTok, but definitely a significant amount of my time goes towards Twitter as well now. It's become less and less since it's become more of a shit show. But since I think this is a lot more Twitter book, but there are people on TikTok that are talking about it. And I think their videos are pretty, popular. It's not like they're, underground.
No, there's a lot of, mainstream book talkers that I saw that had been reviewing this book and raving about this book when I was scrolling through the hashtag for it. So it definitely has a following.
I think that tweet did make it an impact blow it up. I think it's good to read stuff that maybe necessarily isn't as popular. I think that's one thing that I know I kind of fall into a trope where it's somebody I don't read probably as much as Mariah or other book talkers and stuff like that in general, where they're always like, oh, I've read 1,000 books this year and stuff like that. I think I'm definitely a much more average consumer of books where I like to do other things in the meantime instead of just read, where I think most book talkers and Mariah, that is your form of reading, when I prefer to watch television, movies, play video games, and do other things, and also read. And I still have read a decent amount. I'm at 45 books this year, so it's not like I'm not reading, but I think it's good to read more things that maybe aren't necessarily Goodreads top 100 books for 2023 or something. And I do think that's something that I end up falling into that trope a lot, because whenever you don't read as much as other people, it's a lot harder to find books that you want to make sure they're worth your time because you're taking time out of doing something else that could be easily entertaining. So
I'd have to agree, because a book is a big investment. It's a big time sink regardless of what you're reading. Even if it's an audiobook and you have it on 2 times speed, it's gonna be longer than any movie or an episode of a TV show that you're gonna watch.
People are saying that the audiobook for this is only 4 hours, which I think probably would have been faster than I read this book. Because I do agree with the criticisms where it's very wordy, and so you kind of have to I had to reread a few things a couple times.
I was looking through reviews on Goodreads of the 1-star or 2-star reviews, and that was one of the biggest criticisms, is that people were rereading paragraphs over and over again, because sentence by sentence it makes sense.
Yes.
But reading it as a whole,
yep,
it can
It's
go
too
over your head. I
complex.
don't
Yeah.
know. So a lot of people think it's very pretentious. It can be difficult to follow, and it's kind of a time sink with debatable payoff. Like it can. I've seen people really enjoy it, or they really hate it, or they DNF it, which
I
I
know
understand.
you wanted to DNF it, but
Thought about it.
because of scheduling conflicts within our podcast, I think that's the main contributing factor on why you finished this book. Because we've obviously have been very pro Palestine on our social media accounts, and us in general, we have talked about that. But the issue is that we planned out things for the month out, and these authors have now come out and not been pro-Palestine, so we do not want to support them on our podcast or talk about them in any positive way. So we kind of had to reschedule everything, and this was one of the books that we were like, oh, we're going to do a podcast on, but then Mariah was like hating it, so we were like, okay, we'll just do another novel, but then it ended
It was
up...
like less than 200 pages.
It's
Like
it's not long at all.
but yet it was a struggle. It was very difficult.
And I actually
200
finished
pages.
this before you did, and that rarely happens where I finish a book before you did. And I think that's a testament because, like, I won't say I love this book. This was not, like, I'm living, dying, breathing by this book. I thought it was fine. I enjoyed some parts more than others, and I think it definitely can be, like, thought-provoking in ways if you're not confused. But I think that's also the issue with the medium of books and time travel. Time travel in general is very confusing.
Because you gave it like a 3.5 star,
Mhm.
right, out of 5 on Goodreads, which is pretty decent for your ratings.
I think it's like a little bit better than a mid book. It's definitely like I think
It had potential.
it definitely, I liked the premise. I was very interested in like how it was gonna play out and stuff like that. But I do think the writing style, not like the style, because it's kind of is very letter based. It'll be like 2 or 3 pages of, I guess, like how the main character. So the premise of this book is there are 2 characters, Red and Blue. They are working for opposite, I don't know what you want to call them, like...
So we just give a summary before we get into reviews?
Yeah.
Because maybe that'll make sense. I can read it off if you want.
Yeah,
I
you
had
can
to
read
pull
it.
this from the book because
Mhm.
trying to come up with my own summary was...
After you reading it?
I was like, I need to read this. I don't know what it is. I just read. But the summary says, in the ashes of a dying world, Red finds a letter marked "Burn before reading," signed by Blue. So begins an unlikely correspondence between 2 rival agents in a war that stretches through the vast reaches of time and space. Red belongs to the agency, quote unquote, a post-singularity technotopia. Blue belongs to, quote unquote, the garden, which is a single vast consciousness embedded in all organic matter. Their past are bloody and their future is mutually exclusive. They have nothing in common save that they're the best, and they're alone. Now, what began as a battlefield boast grows into a dangerous game. One both Red and Blue are determined to win, because winning's what you do in war, isn't it? Like, that's the TLDR of the book, essentially. It sounds great. Like, reading just that.
The synopsis makes it sound like great, and I do think that the idea and the whole premise of it is a really good idea. I just don't think this book was the best possible medium for it. I look at this book and I say this would be a perfect TV show. If this was made on like an 8-episode limited series, this would be probably one of the highest rated like TV shows to come out. And I don't know if they're working on anything like that, but I just think that this medium as a book was not the best way to visualize this in ways where, at least like with the descriptions and things like that, it's kind of hard to follow along in ways where if you can visually see like the different, because it is a time travel story, like we're jumping back and forth from like way in the past to like way in their future. It's like back and forth, like from the first time they met to the middle of the meeting. It's different times for everyone, and I think where if you're in like, at least in like a movie or a TV show setting, you can easily visualize when like the younger character is reading the letter versus whenever an older version of that same character is reading a letter. And I think it's very hard to come across like within this book of fiction where you can't easily distinguish like what has happened in this person's life for them to be consuming this letter and what it means to them at that point in their life, because it's time travel.
Yeah, I would have to agree, because I gave the book like a 3-star rating, and it's beautifully written. Like the love letters that they write each other, oh my god, it's I've never had a partner talk to me like that. I'm just don't look at me like that. You gotta read this. Brandon, and you'll understand. It's crazy. But then the plot is so convoluted at times, and I don't know what's happening. And I guess that's part of it. Like, it seems like, oh, you're supposed to feel lost and just embrace it. No, that's not me.
It's like the first 100 pages of Crescent City, if it was that was the whole book.
Exactly. But worse. Almost worse because of the time traveling, because they're bouncing all over the place. Like, there's no consistent real plot line outside of them finding letters and communicating to each other. And with those run-on, one-sided dialogues.
It is a very complex book, which I wonder if maybe because, like, I think this makes it better to read it as, like, people that can discuss it instead of reading it and just sitting it alone with your thoughts. I think that would make it very hard to enjoy this.
It was one of the only books I think I've ever owned, which I was showing Kristen, because we have different editions of the book, where mine had book club questions for people to, like, explore the book further, and I don't think I've ever had that at the end of a book that I can remember.
I definitely have had that in books, maybe not for, like, book club, but usually it'll be like novels that you read with, like, school. But I don't think this is something you should be reading in school either. I mean, I guess you could read it with school, like, if you had a pretentious English teacher.
So Kristen did a lot of the
I did
additional
the
research for the authors. I did not do this. This part's not me.
Well, I can talk about then what I did for my research. So I think with this current political climate, a lot of the time you can see what they think through their social medias. Yes? Would you agree?
Yeah.
So Twitter has this amazing feature where if you go to someone's Twitter account, there's a little search bar next to their name. You can click on it. You can type in whatever word you want, and it'll show you all the tweets with that word in it. So I looked through a few words. So for Miss Amal El Omatar, I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced it, but there's two authors. One is a man, one is a woman. That is what they identify as. I'm assuming theirs is, from what I could tell. But Amal, she is a Canadian poet and a writer of speculative fiction, and she's pretty much done any type of, like, written work you can think of: magazines, poetry, fiction, essays, reviews. She's done it all. She has other, like, short stories and stuff that have won awards and things like that, but this is one of the most popular ones. This has won quite a few book awards, actually. Whatever the Locust, Hugo, and Nebula awards are. I don't know what those are, but this book has won it. So I went to her Twitter, and the first thing you see on her Twitter is pro-Palestine things, which is great. We love pro-Palestine. Exactly how you should be, especially somebody using their platform to talk about that, which is great. But if you look, I looked up at her tweets. Trump was one of the first things I looked. And she criticizes Trump and about how he speaks about liberals and things like that. But I looked up Biden. She has not said one thing about Joe Biden at all.
So that could be good or
that could be good or bad. There's no criticizing of him with how he's handling the situation about funding Israel or anything like that. It's just been actively, like, pro-Palestine and how we should be, like, supporting Palestine in this stuff. But from the way that, like, whenever you look up Trump, during Trump's presidency, there's hundreds of tweets of her criticizing Trump. Very political person, as you can tell. But then to have the obvious silence on any criticization of Joe Biden in this election cycle very much gives, to me personally, liberal vibes. Because, as we know, whenever Joe Biden got back into office, liberals suddenly think that life is back to normal, our country is not a shit show anymore, and that they can sit there and put their rose-colored glasses back on and see the world as this amazing place.
Well, don't you know? Because whenever a liberal is in office, democracy is safe. It's sacred.
Mm-hmm. So, but this is not me saying that, like, oh my god, like, this is such a horrible thing to do. I just think it's very interesting to see that these people are very political whenever they think fascism, their idea of fascism, is on its way into works. But whenever people like Joe Biden, who are currently upholding the same standards that Trump was holding, and obviously Joe Biden is not openly homophobic, Islamophobic, or, like, very openly these things, but the things that he does within our country behind the scenes are still upholding these ideas of white supremacy and not saying anything about it is very interesting. Also, she's Canadian. So I just want to also, like, put that out there. Like, I guess I should have looked up Justin Trudeau. I did not look up that.
Okay,
But
I didn't know that Max Gladstone was a man.
Oh, it's his picture's on the back of mine. That's how I knew. The man and a woman here.
But why?
That's
Is he
another
queer?
thing.
Is he, like a cis-het white man?
Not that I did not see anything about his sexuality in any way, shape, or form. But I also was not really looking like that because I didn't know, even, no offense to gay men, but I don't know how often they should be writing sapphic romances.
Oh, somebody else wrote about this too. There's a review on here about how he's a man writing the perspective of a queer woman.
Very suspicious things, which I was also going to move into. Mr. Max Gladstone is a fantasy author. He's published other novels and stuff like that are more big on the fantasy scene. But then again, both of these people do not have science fiction backgrounds, and I wonder if that plays into how this novel works out, since neither of these authors have science fiction. Just because you write fantasy does not mean you write science fiction. That is a hill I will die on. And I think this shows that this can be like a weaker novelization than somebody who maybe is specifically a science fiction writer could probably have done. But I don't know. This guy, he's not very active on social media. His profile picture on Twitter is still Writers Guild on strike, which, as we know, we're currently at the end of November at the time of recording this. The Writers Guild strike has been over for 2 months now. Just about. And his profile picture is still the Writers Guild are on strike. But I did see him retweeting some things earlier in November about him talking about his books being on sale on Kindle specifically. But he hasn't said one thing about Israel or Palestine or anything about that.
Which is problematic at this point in time.
At this point in time, it is problematic. And it's not that we're saying that, oh, this guy needs to pick a side either. No.
Or that, like, them saying it is going to somehow, like, magically give the world a solution to the like settler colonial violence that Palestinians are facing on a day-to-day basis. However, if you have a platform, you're making money, and you claim at points or like in your books to be fighting for something, some sort of cause, it is strange that they don't contextualize that into real world. And I do feel like there is like they try to make it apolitical because it's like futuristic in this novel or novella, however you want to fucking call it.
It's considered a novella according to Wikipedia.
It doesn't make. Okay, let's do a little reach. Do you find it strange when you read science fiction novels or anything based in the future and it's still like
capitalistic,
existing within the lens of like a class-based society? Like, just because they like abolish sexual and like gender roles and that aspect of like patriarchal ideology doesn't mean that like I don't.
Well, I'm not somebody that consumes a lot of, let's say, science fiction novels. I don't really. I never really have been really into science fiction, but my boyfriend, he is very into science fiction. Watches like all of the Westworld and all of like any of like those like science fiction, because I think science fiction in movies and TV is very big. It's a very big genre of things where I don't know if people are using it as a form of escapism and stuff like that. But I've noticed that in these like futuristic things, it's always like, to me, usually they're giving vibes of critiquing capitalism in many ways, because they're like, but I just don't see like at this current stage of how like far we are into like late stage capitalism for it going on another 100 years.
It's weird.
But like these shows and these movies, these books, they're predicting as if we're still going to be living in this capitalist society for hundreds, thousands of years maybe. And I just don't. And that's the thing, is that even like when Karl Marx has like discussed writing about capitalism and stuff, he says it's not like a long-term solution for anything. And I don't know if it's just supposed to be like fantasy in like a way where they're like, oh, we're in the good part of capitalism now, and then once it goes this far, then it'll be bad, you know? Where it's a very much like privileged take of it. And I'm not sure, like that's the thing about these people, is that the same thing with this guy. He tweeted a bunch about Trump, criticizing Trump, and then in 2020 he endorsed Biden, and he donated $500 to his campaign. So to me,
money, even though like $500 is.
I mean, obviously it's not like a big donation. Towards, like, that's $500 more than I have to put towards a political candidate I even like. You know, if I was to donate money. Anytime I donated to a campaign, which I donated to Bernie Sanders back in like 2016, I only had like $5 to donate. You know, so it's just. interesting that, and I wonder, I don't know enough about science fiction in general, but it almost seems liberal, like wet dream.
I think it can be. I say this as somebody who's, like, exclusively reading, like, my sci-fi is Ruby Dixon and, like, her whole universe that she's created. But even she takes it a step further. Like with Ice Planet Barbarians, you have like this anarcho-primitive society. Different societies within her realm that she has created are a lot more like egalitarian, except like Earth, which is in like a post-apocalyptic like, dragon run. A rift opens up, but they still maintain a lot of like principles of capitalism and like gender roles. But it does like seem to progress and get better as like other things happen. I don't know, but it does seem to like happen. Like it like space capitalism is a thing. I don't like it. I don't know why. It has to exist. Like it's fantasy. Just take it. Full send it.
I just wonder if maybe, because it's not like I've not read many like like big capitalism novels, just because like I don't even know what to read, so I just don't know if maybe people are just writing what they know. That's like what they say to do, right? What you know. And the only thing that any of us really knows, especially in like without doing external research yourself, you're only gonna know capitalism. And so that's why I wonder if to me, this almost like lacks so much like political foundation. Like it's just like there's like no politics versus or like at all. It's just like two like not even like I guess like superpowers or like world powers fighting against each other, but you don't really know exactly like what they believe, because like one is like could be like eco-fascist because they are like the nature side of things, and there are like eco-fascists like within our society and stuff like that. And like the fact is that we don't know enough about like what these, I know what you want to call them, like these groups of people. Like, you don't know enough about what they believe to even know what side to root for.
Like, all we know is that Garden is everything organic. So, like, basically, like, Poison Ivy from the Batman comics and DC Universe, like, how she advocates for that because she realizes, like, humans are destroying it. That's essentially, like, what's happening with Blue. And then as for Red,
I don't know.
technology?
But, like, technology in what way? Because, like, that's the thing is that, like, and I think
But there's, like, nanobots, but it doesn't make sense, and I think this is where it gets convoluted, and I understand that people stand this book because it's so pretty and whatnot, but it's lacking a lot.
It definitely is beautifully written in like a way you could say, and like I just want anybody to know who's like listening to this or watching this, like we're talking about this very broadly. To be honest, I don't even know if we could really talk about this specifically except for the last 50 pages of this book,
and those were arguably the best 50 pages of the book.
Yeah, I guess maybe like 45ish or 30-ish pages. Like it was like basically I say now we can get into spoilers because there's really only one spoiler that I think you could do for this book, right?
Oh, and that it's like a Donnie Darko type, like bootstrap paradox. Like it has to be continuation. Like they both save each other or do things in their
past.
Saying
we could just go into spoilers now. Just like
that's like essentially it. It's like a Donnie Darko Romeo and Juliet type of retelling. I don't know how to explain it any other way unless you've seen that movie.
I have not seen Donnie Darko, so
Romeo and Juliet, like how they're like
I
destined
do get,
to be together.
Romeo and Juliet vibes, definitely. But like, I don't know, because like time travel itself is very, and I'm very thankful that it can never happen. Right? We can agree that it'll never happen. Like, there's no way that you go back in time. Correct? I know there's some like people that are like, well, you don't know. I think we do know. At least there's no way that any human that lives on this earth is going to figure out time travel. I don't know, like, what other species and other planets, what kind of powers they have, but I don't think, especially not in our lifetime, but I don't know how much longer the earth will last after our lifetime either, though. There will be no type of time travel, and I think it's good because there's so many conflicting ideas on how time travel would work anyways, because there's, like, this is kind of like a butterfly effect like way, but then the way that they describe it is that like it's a hair and it's braided, and then you take one strand of hair, you move it, and that affects the entire course of it instead of making a new strand of reality something. Instead of like it being like, I guess, like a parallel universe situation, it's more of like a
cause and effect.
Yeah,
that's like what it boils down to, I guess. But then it kind of is following in line with like Doctor Who and the timelines that they have. for the most part.
But is it? Because, like, I don't understand why these two, like, world powers just don't go back in time to, like, the beginning of the Earth being formed. They could just duke it out right there, can't they? And then whoever wins there, that's gonna affect the rest of the strand, right? Wouldn't that be, like, something that could
The
happen?
logical conclusion to hit the root of the...
Like, instead
Are
of
we
going
getting
to
into, like...
all these different points of interest, because, like, they kind of go throughout history, but then they also go into the future. But I feel like the only, like, major historical thing that is mentioned is the Mongols. And, like, Red goes to visit with the Mongols
Or
and lives with
Atlantis.
them. But is Atlantis even... I thought Atlantis was fake.
So did I. I'm gonna be honest.
Isn't it?
Is it? I don't know.
What are you looking for?
See, this is where we get into Joseph Scala's dialectical and historical materialism and analyzing history and getting to the root of our issues. That is the viewpoint in which we are attacking and addressing the plot of this book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you are not, maybe you're an anarchist, I don't know, maybe you don't do this. That's why people like it so much, because they're not Marxist. I just can't see Marxists enjoying this book. Or maybe people who are neurotypical, because as a neurodivergent individual, there's just not mathing right.
And I think that's why I think the message, whatever message they were trying to portray, I don't think cross very well. If they say, like, oh, we weren't trying to portray a message, we were trying to write a love story between red and blue. That's a lie, because as we all know, like, writing is very inherently political. Even if you're just writing a love story, it's still political in some way. And so that's why I think whatever message they were trying to, like, I don't know if they were trying to say, like, a mix with technology and being natural is what we need in society or something like that.
Well, and then we take it and we talk about the seeker, right? The seeker, this purplish seeker going through time and space and following Red.
Yeah, I thought it was very obvious that it was like, I thought it was like maybe her kid or something, but I thought it was definitely something related to her and Blue specifically, because red and blue make purple, obviously. Like, so I was
Which you picked up on that. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't pick up on that because I was like, I don't know who this this entity is, but it just ends up being Red going through the strands,
becoming more like blue,
becoming more purple, and they both like end up consuming different parts of the other person, and like they both become a little bit until they're purple. And I don't know if that's the solution. It's like we just need to view all viewpoints, meet in the middle.
That sounds like a very liberal take, so I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that
kind of, right? Doesn't that what it is? Like,
yeah.
Oh, just
if we just like vote out fascism, if the people want to vote in fascism, that's fine. Like, that's what the people want.
This is why you need to vote blue no matter who this election season.
We are not endorsing Joe Biden. Do not vote for Joe Biden ever. If you vote for Joe Biden, count your days.
We can make a separate episode on the electoral college system in Lenin.
Yeah.
But not today. We're just talking about this
book.
Fucking book. I don't know. It just lacks a lot of substance and a lot of plot. It feels like the characters are super underdeveloped, and I don't feel bad for them. I don't have any emotional ties to any of them. I don't really care what happens. I just wanted the book to be over, and I was so happy when it was done. Because I was like, well, I did it, and I can talk about it.
I just feel like it's sad whenever, like, because, like, you get really into it, I think, the last 50 pages. That's what I think ultimately moved it from a 3 stars to 3.5 for me, was I really enjoyed the last 50 pages. But the fact that the last 50 pages are so good, and then you go into, like, okay, well, you're done now. If the whole book, I think, was more like the last 50 pages, it would have been better. Even if it wanted to take, like, this centrist idea overall. But, I mean, it's a really highly rated book.
It's very highly rated. I was surprised to see that it only had, like, 13,000 reviews on Amazon, but it had 169,000 reviews on Goodreads, so I think that is related to it blowing up. Mm-hmm. As of recently on
that tweet got
TikTok and Twitter.
The tweet got almost 20 million views. So
it's a lot for Twitter.
That's a lot of people looking at a tweet, for real. And I guess, I don't know, I think a lot more people focus on the love story aspect of it more than they focus on the political part. But then me and you are not very much big romance consumers. I read romance before, and I have read romance, but like most of the stuff that we consume, I think romance is usually subplot and not major plot. So I wonder if that's made it harder for me and you personally to enjoy, because maybe we're trying to view the romance as a subplot, but it's the plot.
And I do read a lot of,
Like,
it's usually monster romance, right?
yeah.
Where, like, the relationships and all of that is at the front center, and I think those do a better job of, like, world building and depicting politics. Like, I just had Kristen recently read The Dragon's Bride
And
by Kate Roberts,
we
and
can
you
talk
don't
about that book too.
but can you not see, like, the politic like, at least it makes sense. Like,
I think it made an effort.
it made an
I
effort to
won't
make
say that
sense.
it was a
You could
good
follow
effort.
it. But you could follow it, right? Like, you knew
But
where it
I
was
do
going,
think
you
that's
kind of
very
knew.
different genres of books as well, that versus this, specifically.
True.
Because...
But, yeah, that's the book. I can't think of anything else to say about it, because you just don't know what the intentions were, and I don't know, it just sits weird. Now that I know that Max is
a man.
because it's not to say that, like, men, because I know there are a lot of, like, trans men who are lesbian, but, like a regular cis
Cis
white man who
man.
doesn't normally write books like this, who decided to write half of this book from the perspective of a queer, gender nonconforming individual, it just feels, I don't
Very...
know,
It
it
doesn't
doesn't sit
sit
right
right.
with me.
Yeah. It's very suspicious. It's definitely a weird... And saying that, like, if Matar wrote this herself, I don't know if she's a queer woman herself. So even, like, this is not to say that straight people should not write queer romances either. But I think making it the forefront and the popularization of your novel be, like, sapphic, or, like, I always get that feeling, like, with Casey McQuiston with her Red, White, and Royal Blue. I haven't read it, but it's a white woman, which I don't know if she's queer, but I know she's wrote other queer novels where they've been, like, sapphic and things too. But I think only making like, it's hard to, like, say, like, making something like the forefront of your novel, like, something that you can't experience or you won't experience, is a very weird thing, and it makes it feel like you could just be like, oh, well, this is fictional, so anything can happen, sort of thing.
Because it doesn't translate right, because you know it's missing something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even without knowing this until we started this podcast, like, reading through this, it doesn't feel, like, romantic, and I don't know, like, at times it can, but it doesn't feel...
I think it's hard to be romantic whenever you never meet each other for real, too. Like, they don't ever, like, have a face-to-face conversation for years and years. They only communicate through letters. And, like, I just know that, like, at the end of the book, they both live, and they're, like, running off through time together to hide from, like, their respective, like, corporations or whatever. They're, like, the group of people they're running from. I just know their relationship is probably, like, 5 years max, for real. Because you think about, like, imagine, like, it's just like whenever you, like, talk to someone over text only, and then you meet them in person, it's not gonna translate the same.
Unless it's us.
Well, but we also, like, video chat and, like, face chat, you know, where we have conversations. They didn't imagine us just texting only.
That would be weird.
That would
never...
And then, like, because, like, I think everyone, like, texts and, like, writes out their thoughts so differently than how they speak them. Because, one, you sit there and you mull over the thoughts that you're gonna say, and you can do it. While if you're talking, you just say it.
I also think, and this might be a little bit of a reach, but the way that, like, the book is constructed, it almost feels like a critique of, like, authoritarianism too, because of the higher ups and, like, the red side of, like, the technotopia. They have, like, jail.
Jail.
So
I mean, she did get locked up.
It almost feels like it's like these are the oh god, it's because it's like a push. I guess, like, a gulag. I got a lot of. It was, like, weird. There was a weird Soviet moment.
I didn't
don't
get
know.
the Soviet moment. I don't know what Soviet moment you're discussing.
There was a Soviet moment in the book where they were talking about Soviets, and like, they were torturing somebody, and I don't know.
But if it was, like, World War II sort of thing.
I don't know. I need to double check. I just remember reading that and I was like, I don't know what this is supposed to be.
I don't know either. And I think that's one thing too with, like, these people, like, not having, like, from, like, if they're not liberals, like, that's great, but you definitely are not portraying yourself as not liberal on social media.
Or they're like a self-described, like, leftist, quote unquote leftist.
I hate the term leftist so much, and I hate that it's, like, popularized so much. It's such a stupid phrase. So stupid.
Do you have anything else to say? Do we recommend this book?
I would say yes if you are a big science fantasy person and a big reader. You have to be both to enjoy this book. If you're big into sci-fi but you're not a big reader, no. If you're big into reading but not big into sci-fi, no.
This is not going to be a book that's going to get you back into reading, and I also think maybe if you're tired of reading just, like, you know, like run-of-the-mill romance stories, maybe give this a shot if you want something more thought-provoking.
It's
perhaps
complex.
Work through it slower. Like, read one chapter, one section a day.
Yeah.
So you can, like, kind of sit on it, mull it over, and maybe that would be better. But reading it all in one go, I don't think is as impactful. And I saw some other people recommend that you're supposed to, like,
digest,
indulge it and over time, not just in, like, a sitting.
But I could not read like that. Me personally, I know that is not how I read. Everything. No, literally. Like, I had to, like, be constantly reading this, pretty much. I mean, I read, like, this is the first year I've ever read multiple books at once. Where last year I just read.
Off on you. I'm giving you.
I don't like it. It looks so cluttered. Everything having so many, like, I have so many books. Like, 5 books on my, like, Goodreads shelf and, like, the Storygraph thing. I hate how much there was. Before, it used to only be 1. And it was clean and it was nice. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else we'd like to say about This Is How You Lose the Time War, except for it's, like, science fiction, liberal fantasy.
If you enjoy it, that's great. But I don't think you should, like, talk shit about people that are, like, DNFing it or don't get it, saying that they haven't, like, quote unquote opened up their third eye, which is something that I saw in reviews. Like, you just haven't opened up your third eye, which gives off, like, a very, like, white woman moment.
I think that's not everybody reads to have thought-provoking, like, deep intellectual thoughts. Some people read for fun, actually. And I don't think this is a book that is meant to be read for fun, which is fine. Not everybody wants to read books for fun. Some people like to read and dissect. But I will say that this is definitely something that is not written for you to sit down and enjoy and, like, cozy up with your cup of tea. Be like,
at least not for us.
Twisting your hair, kicking your feet. Like, this is not that kind of romance. I did not get any butterflies. I've read some, like, books where I've gotten butterflies for, like, the main character. I'll be like, ooh, like, this is kind of sweet. Like, this is really, like, nice. This was written beautifully, but I think it was also written too complex where you couldn't get the butterfly feelings. Like, if somebody, like, said this stuff to me, like, to my face while I was, like, sitting there talking to them, I'd be like, what are you talking about? It's almost like Shakespearean in a way. You need them to translate it on that side for you.
Man, let's, like, dumb it down.
Yeah.
Tell me what.
Just say how you feel. You don't need to, like, compare me to Summer's Day. But yeah. I guess if there's no clothing thoughts, you can find us on our social medias. And next week we will be discussing the silent patient.
Yeah.
The author's name.
Contingent on the author not coming out as a Zionist. We have yet to see anything. Yes. We've been doing a lot more research on the books, the authors.
The author is not on social media for that book at all, so who knows if he will actually say anything, which is not a good thing as well, but also maybe he has said something somewhere and we just can't find it. Other than that, thanks for listening. We'll be back again with a thriller. Very Christmassy, huh?
And if anyone has any suggestions, please let us know.
Yeah.
Anything.
Anything.
We'll check it out. It's because we're running out of ideas.
Hey, we're good till, like, February, I think.
Right now. Crossing our fingers.
Crossing our fingers that nobody comes out and says that they say anything insanely insane, but other than that, that's it. Goodbye.